Captain Jack Henderson was a human star pilot with a penchant for trouble and a knack for navigating the galaxy's most treacherous trade routes. Today, he was on a mission that required a bit of finesse, or at least a ship that didn't sound like it was falling apart at every turn. His beloved vessel, the Starblazer, had developed an alarming rattle in the hyperdrive, and that was why Jack was on the dusty, barren world of HFY in search of a mechanic. He had heard rumors of an exceptional alien mechanic known as Greg, who it was said could work miracles on hyperdrives. Jack didn't put much stock in rumors, but with his ship making noises that could wake the dead, he figured he had nothing to lose. As he approached Greg's workshop, a ramshackle collection of metal huts and scattered parts, Jack couldn't help but notice the layers of dust coating everything. The place looked more like a scrapyard than a reputable repair shop. He took a deep breath, preparing for whatever bizarre interaction lay ahead, and knocked on the nearest metal door. A moment later, the door creaked open to reveal a tall, green-skinned alien with a mashed face, long arms and wearing next to nothing except a banana hammock tool belt over his private parts. When the alien smiled, Jack was greeted by a cluster of mix and match teeth that looked to be a homemade job. He also wore a pair of bright blue shoes. Jack began to worry. "Welcome to Greg's workshop. I am Greg. How can I assist you?" the alien said, his mouth curling into a wide, almost predatory grin. "I'm Captain Jack. My ship, the Starblazer, needs some repairs. It's been making a weird clunking noise when I engage the hyperdrive," Jack explained, hoping he hadn't made a terrible mistake coming here. Greg's eyes lit up with what could only be described as mechanical glee. "A clunking noise, you say? Intriguing, let me take a look." Jack followed Greg through the cluttered yard to where the Starblazer was parked. Greg immediately began circling the ship, poking and prodding at various panels and components with his myriad tools. His enthusiasm was both encouraging and mildly terrifying. Greg assured him with a confidence that made Jack's stomach churn, "Return tomorrow, and I shall have the problem diagnosed." Jack took a rental transport into town and got a hotel room for the night. He'd never been to HFY, and from the looks of the place, he hadn't missed much. The place was a dump, but supposedly they had a really good starship mechanic here. That remained to be seen. The next day, he returned to find Greg standing outside his shop, looking particularly pleased with himself. "Is it fixed?" Jack asked, a hint of trepidation in his voice. Greg's grin widened, if that were even possible. "It is to a degree," he said, rubbing his two grease-covered hands together, making sure that they were both equally covered in the gooey mess. Jack's heart sank. Greg led him around to the other side of the ship, and Jack's eyes nearly popped out of his head. The Starblazer, his pride and joy, was completely disassembled. Parts were strewn across the ground, organized into neat, yet disconcerting piles. "What in the name of all that is holy have you done?" Jack exclaimed, his voice a mix of anger and bewilderment. Greg chuckled nervously. "Before you worry, I believe I have solved your issue, even though it did take more investigation than originally assumed. You see, as I started investigating the clunking noise, I realized it could be caused by any number of things. So I decided the best course of action was to take the whole ship apart to find the exact problem." Jack stared at the piles of parts, his mind struggling to process what he saw. "You took my entire ship apart?" "Yes, but not to worry. Now that it's in pieces, it is simply a matter of putting it back together," Greg said, as if this were the most logical approach in the universe. "It is the most efficient course of action." "Efficient," Jack repeated, incredulous. "My ship is scattered all over this dusty hellhole. Putting it back together is the only course of action." "Think of it as a puzzle," Greg suggested brightly. "A very large, complex puzzle. But once we solve it, your ship will be better than ever." Jack sighed, realizing he had no choice but to trust this green-skinned mad being. "Fine, but you better put it back together exactly how it was. And how much is this going to cost?" "Cost? Oh, that cannot be estimated at this time. Yet worry not. I am famous because my fees are unbelievably fair. I do this work more out of a desire to solve puzzles than it is to earn credits," his enthusiasm undiminished. "This will be fine." Not trusting the green-skinned alien, Jack helped Greg reassemble the Starblazer. The ship was not only how he made his living, but it was also his home. Despite his initial frustration, Jack couldn't help but be impressed by Greg's encyclopedic knowledge of starship mechanics. The alien seemed to remember where every single piece belonged, and his dexterity with tools was nothing short of miraculous. Jack admitted to Greg that he didn't know much about the engine system. That was for others to know. He was a damn good pilot and earned his living by transporting often contraband cargo through hostile territories. But for that, he needed a reliable hyperdrive engine, and he was willing to pay to keep it in tip-top condition and Greg seemed to know what he was doing. During their work, Greg regaled Jack with stories of his previous repair jobs, each more absurd than the last. There was the time he accidentally converted a ship's life support system into a high-powered vacuum cleaner, or the time he inadvertently turned an interstellar freighter into a freezer. The stories were funny, if a little disconcerting. A mechanic shouldn't be telling his customer about his screw-ups, but it was all good-natured fun. Jack still marveled at the speed and efficiency of Greg's work, and in spite of Jack's complete lack of mechanical skills, the two of them made an unlikely but effective team, slowly but surely piecing the ship back together. One particularly grueling afternoon, as they were working on the hyperdrive, Jack asked, "So, Greg, have you always been a mechanic?" Greg nodded, his hands deftly reattaching wires. "Oh yes, Captain. I've always had a knack for fixing things. My mother used to say I could repair a broken heart if I had enough duct tape." Jack chuckled. "I believe it. You certainly have a unique approach." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the Starblazer was back in one piece. Jack inspected every inch of the ship, ensuring everything was where it should be. As far as he could tell, he had to admit, Greg had done an impressive job. "Well, she looks as good as new. Just one more thing to do," Jack said, his tone begrudgingly appreciative. Greg beamed, a hand wiping imaginary sweat from his brow. "Yes, Captain. Now, let's see if that clunking noise is gone." Jack and Greg climbed aboard, and Jack initiated the pre-flight checks. Everything seemed to be in order. They used the chemical jets to get into space before Jack engaged the hyperdrive. The engine hummed to life, the familiar sensation of the jump to hyperspace filling the cabin. Jack held his breath, waiting for the clunking noise, but it never came. Instead, the transition was smooth and silent. "Well, I'll be damned. You actually did it," Jack said, relief washing over him. Greg grinned. "I told you, Captain, no more clunking noise. Oh, and here, I believe this belongs to you." Greg reached out his hand, which held a shattered continuous wormhole communicator. Jack frowned. "The source of your clunking sound," Greg explained. "Apparently, you must have dropped the device in the vacuum toilet. From there, it circulated through the recycling system before becoming lodged at the starboard side exhaust port. This caused a backup of hyperdrive fluid that then overflowed onto the rail joint. This caused drying of the focusing rings, which began to rub against the spanner wheel. Hence, your clunking sound." Jack took the crumpled device. The screen was shattered, and the metal case was twisted at a 90-degree angle. He was embarrassed beyond belief. "I wondered where this was," Jack admitted. "I had another one around, so I didn't worry too much." Greg grinned. "I would suggest being more judicious with your devices. But you are not alone. They say 73% of all people admit to dropping their communication units in the toilet. But most people retrieve them before they disrupt a hyperdrive system." Jack laughed, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. "You know, Greg, you're one hell of a mechanic. A little unconventional, but damn good." "Thank you, Captain. It was a pleasure working on the Starblazer. If you ever need more repairs, you know where to find me," Greg said, extending a hand. "And now for the bill." Seeing that the clunking sound had been Jack's fault from the beginning, the human was happy to pay the somewhat high repair bill. The sooner he got this episode behind him, the better. Even so, he knew that the story of the starship captain who dropped his comm device in the toilet and screwed up his hyperdrive system would enter Greg's catalog of humorous stories to tell future customers. That was fine, as long as Greg didn't mention Jack's name. Back on Awful 3, Greg watched the Starblazer disappear into the void, a satisfied grin on his face. He pulled a screwdriver from his tool belt and spun it in the air, catching it with aplomb. He considered the 4,200 credits he got for the job, a job that in reality was done even before the gullible human starship captain had left his shop for the trip into town. A tightening of a screw was all it took, a job that would normally cost 35 credits. But when Greg found the CW-COM device wedged harmlessly in the recycled chute, it provided the proper cover story for a more extensive and profitable repair job. Greg continued to grin as he turned to his next project, a ship with a mysterious whining noise. "All right, let's see what we have here," he muttered, his hands already moving to take apart the ship piece by piece. He'd already diagnosed the problem and solution, but that wasn't how he made his money. He made his living from bilking gullible aliens out of their hard-earned credits for a whole variety of unnecessary and costly repairs, and Greg was very good at what he did. Story by T.R. Harris. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy HFY stories with a humorous slant. Check out all my 70-plus novels on Amazon or go to my website at bytrharris.com. Thank you for listening.